wonderful. Okay, I think we're just going to kick off, Brendan. It's a slightly different clinical discussion, this one, because we're going to do an introduction to the EP3 event that's coming up in June in Manchester, UK. But we're also going to talk about Brendan's session, which I'm really excited to hear about because it's quite unusual. So just before we actually get stuck in, we do the introduction, so I don't forget to say anything. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and a very warm welcome to this clinical discussion with myself and Brendan Mouatt. My name is Joanna Taylor, and I am Director of Noigroup Europe, and I am absolutely, excuse me, delighted to be joined today by Brendan. Now, for any of you who may not be familiar with Brendan, though I expect most of you know who he is, Brendan is an accredited exercise physiologist based in Adelaide, Australia, and the CEO of Noigroup. Brendan, would you just tell people a little bit about what you're currently working on?
Oh, what am I working on?
Ah,
Apart from
yeah.
EP3, I'm also involved in research. We've got a whole lot of projects going on in that space. At Noigroup, we've got a whole lot of other really exciting projects as well, from courses to books to a whole lot of different interesting things. So yeah, that a bit vague, but my mind is very full and my life is very full from everything I get to be a part of at the moment. So I'm
Oh, that's
excited.
fabulous. Thank you. So EP3, we're going to talk about that in more detail
Mhm.
towards the end of this session, and I'll drop the link to that into the chat as well. So if anybody wants to go in and check out more details about that through the session, you can do so. So let's get started. First of all, talking about your session at EP3, or one of your sessions at EP3, and it is called are Boo, Surprise, and Play in Recovery. So that's a pretty unusual title for a clinical session. What is the idea behind it?
Yeah, it is. We sat down, me, Lorimer, Tash, and Dave, and we're coming up with trying to come up with these creative titles and topics to talk about for EP3, and that's one of the ones that came out as being very weird and very, very quirky. But I think what this session talks to is that I think quite often recovery and clinical practice is seen as quite linear.
Yeah.
Someone comes in, we're quite often protocolized in how we might approach different conditions
Hmm.
within pain spectrums and outside of that. And I guess when we really look at the data and complex systems theory and all of these really exciting adjacent fields, we can see that recovery is more than repetition and exposure. I mean, humans learn through exploration, through surprise, through being exposed to stimulus that promotes adaptation. And so it's very, very often not a linear process in
Mm.
what actually unfolds. And I think all the clinicians joining us as well can probably appreciate that they see that is the clinical reality of it. One session is never the same as the next. And so in this session, we're going to be talking about the beauty and the way we can bring surprise
Okay.
into clinical practice, this idea of play into clinical practice, and how we can utilize these different assets that we've got, I guess,
Hmm.
to evoke different outputs, different results, different ways that our patients, our clients, the people we're serving think about themselves, their bodies, their recovery, how they're
Mm.
going to engage with life outside of the clinic room as well. So we're going to be,
Okay.
yeah, exploring sort of all of those sorts of themes there, but how that actually does look in clinical practice as well.
Okay, that's really interesting. So when you talk about surprise as a tool in recovery, what does that actually, sorry, I'm sort of thinking, boo. Yeah, what does that actually look like in the clinical encounter? I'd love to hear
Yeah,
an
well,
example or two.
yeah, absolutely. And I think this is what we're doing already. And it's maybe for some people, they're thinking about it in this context already. And for others, just this shift, I think, to thinking about what we're doing as creating these little elements and moments of surprise for people where either on a conscious level or even a subconscious level, they're getting this surprise to their systems where they're going, well,
Mm,
that wasn't quite what I expected. Or it's a stimulus they haven't had for a while and the wheels didn't fall off the bus. And it's more evidence for our internal models, our generative models, to build a stronger network to say, hey, we are safer than what we thought, or we're more capable of what we thought we could do, or we're more able to do these things that we used to love doing, but had stopped doing. And so
yeah,
it's just thinking about how we might be able to increase that curiosity, that exploration for an individual
yeah,
so that they do get this stimulus of surprise in some way, shape, or form. And that can be in the clinic looking at things like changing maybe something in their environment, changing the timing or the structure of an exercise you quite often do, mixing it up, making it a little unusual,
yeah.
changing maybe the attentional focus of an exercise, thinking about our cues and the way we cue. Perhaps we reflect and we look at, oh, when I'm cueing movement, I'm using a lot of internal cues. Perhaps just shifting to using more externally focused cues
Mm,
could be a way to change the way that they're thinking about their body, the way they perceive movement, changing the goals of the task, just finding different ways to introduce variability rather than what I mean, I can speak to my own experiences. I
yeah.
was trained very much. How do you train repetition, get people to move with at least amount of variation, to be able to hip hinge perfectly, to be able to do a shoulder press with the perfect scapular humeral rhythms, to actually shift that and move away from that, I think has a huge amount of therapeutic potential that we can be exploring. But how do we do that? How do we go about that is very much up for discussion and something that we're going to be exploring in this particular session.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So that makes complete sense. So you're talking about introducing variability into something that somebody might have thought was sort of fairly predictable recovery or rehabilitation. Have you got any examples from people that you may have worked with or stories that you may have heard through others that are actually consciously using this approach in their clinics?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you'll have quite often in my practice, I'll see people, with back pain, and a lot of them will have, your typical bracing, trying to keep a neutral spine for every single one of their movements, trying to make sure that they're hip
Mm,
hinging perfectly if they're to pick something up from the ground. And so in a case like that, it might be trying to explore what happens if we don't brace? What happens if we don't squeeze our glutes? What happens if we roll down through our back? What happens if we don't hold our breath? So they're really, I think, common ones, but we can see things like with shoulder presses and stuff like that, people are
mm,
like really thinking about, setting their shoulder blades and so on. And we go, all right, so what happens if we explore just reaching for the ceiling, try and really stretch out for that? So changing the cue from thinking about pulling your shoulder blades down to actually let's try and touch our fingertips to the ceiling.
mm,
It could be something that they're exploring outside of the clinical practice. So thinking a little bit more ethereal, perhaps, of, every time that I go to spend some time with friends, I always set a time limit of 1 hour. So why is that? Is there, what do you think would happen if you were to stay out a little bit longer and you didn't set a time, but you allowed yourself to kind of go, you know what, I feel the time is right now to leave. And there could be
mm.
that exploration of some of those other aspects of their not life, not just those particular movements, that we could extend these ideas of play to.
Yeah, I love that. It's really, so you've sort of gone down there's a physical element to it where sort of through physical rehab and exercise that you're introducing those variables, if you like. What have you seen in terms of people's reaction to it? So when they do experience that sense of surprise. Oh, I didn't know I could do that. Or is that what we're talking about? Is that I didn't know I could do it, or I didn't know that doing it this way was even an option? Or what are you seeing in terms of the reaction from patients when you're introducing this idea?
Oh, it can vary so much from, I think, people who go, "Wow, I didn't know I could do that,"
Mm,
and I've been avoiding that for so long. And what does that mean for everything else I might be able to do? And this very emotional aspect of what's going on for them. To the other end of the spectrum, where you might not see a whole lot register, like, yeah, I could do that then, but they don't really make sense of it in a way that's overly meaningful. And I think that's where we've got this need, and I think it's something that I've thought about a lot and worked on about how do you then help add this educational layer to these individuals to help them make sense of this information in a really useful way
yeah,
to help guide that recovery, the way that they're engaged moving forward. Because if you just leave it at that, I think there's a missed opportunity for those sorts of
mm,
responses. Whereas we can really capitalize on that if we think about this, layering it in with some pain science education, some sense making, maybe some reflective questions, exploring it with some thought experiments, perhaps. I think we've got a whole host of different tools in our
yeah.
toolbox, if you will, to maximize those sorts of outcomes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Because that's exactly what Lorimer was talking about last week. I think it was in his session, talking about this importance of people doing something in order to cement the concepts and actually having the physical experience of the change, if you like. And this it seems to me that what you're saying is it's opening up possibilities for people, which they may conceptually not have been able to grasp in the same way as if they hadn't had the surprise where they go, "Oh my god, I can do that!" On it just opens up possibilities. Is that what you're saying? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Joe. I think education is not just the things that we say, but it's also the things that we do. They're all opportunities for people to develop these more healthy models of how their body is and what they can do and their capacity, the way that they're going to engage with their environment. And so we've got lots of different ways of tapping into that. And for some people, just talking to them is really powerful and
Yeah.
life-changing. And for some people, that can be invalidating. It can be the other end of the spectrum, right? But if we can
Mm,
start to play around with all of these different aspects of clinical interactions, as these are all potential potent learning experiences, and it's always going to
mm,
be different from one person to the next, then we've got this huge opportunity to create that curiosity, that surprise, that exploration that suits that individual and their previous experience, knowledge, beliefs about the world, and so on.
yeah. And that, I agree completely. And fascinating, really, that just introduce. We've never talked about this element of surprise before in any of these clinical discussions, but it makes complete sense that something which surprises you has a greater impact than just something that you do repeatedly over and over. We all remember things, don't we? They will notch in our mind. And also for the clinician, uh, to be aware of this creating surprise. It's not an angle that we've ever looked at before. And I thought it was really fascinating that we've brought this in.
Yeah, well, I think as clinicians, we do it all the time, whether or not we
Yeah.
think about it in the context of surprise. I mean, in the world of like predictive processing and active inference, we're talking about prediction error, and
Mm,
that's, kind of we're talking about the same sort of thing here. So it's not a new and unique
yeah.
thing, but we do see this across a whole lot of different theoretical models, as well as being these potent ways to create change. And I
Potent.
think leaning into this even more and thinking about it on a deep level is powerful and to me is really exciting.
Yeah. And also, and this is what we see so often, and this is, again, what we talked about a lot with Lorimer was just sort of packaging these models and concepts into something that's just so easy for people to remember. But it makes it very accessible, doesn't it, to call it surprise rather than talking about these sort of clinical models, predictive processing. Everybody's going, "Oh my God, predictive processing!" But you call it surprise, or not. I'm not saying that they are one and the same. I'm just saying that to call it something really accessible like surprise, and you go and see your patient, and you're thinking, "Okay, what could I do to create that potency, that impact through something in this session?" And it just makes it memorable and easy to remember for the clinicians. And this was something we talked about a lot with Lorimer, these anacronyms, which just help people to think about these concepts in a simple way.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think it's so important, isn't it? And Loz and Dave are just so good at that of making these complex ideas more simple. And I think, that's the beauty of working at Noi is the whole idea is to translate this
yeah,
complex science, the things that are useful for, that end user, whether it be the clinician or
exactly.
the person that's needing to benefit.
Yeah, I mean, it is really Noi's whole approach, and it's one of the reasons why I've loved working with Noi for all these years, the last 20 years, is that this has been their vision, their sort of North Star is to make the complex simple, and
Mm.
just sometimes we just really nail it. And I think that this is one of those moments where you think, yeah, so simple, but really, really clever. Thank you, Brendan, for talking about your session that you're going to be doing at EP3. I think that takes us really, really nicely on to have a little bit more in-depth discussion about what else is going to be going on at the EP3 in Manchester, 5th to the 7th of June. So I hope there's some people in the audience who are attending. And if they're not here live, I'm sure they'll be watching on catch up because they're going to be so excited. And this is a bit of a warm up for actually what they're going to experience over the 3 days. So let's have a chat about the highlights of the programme. So you've been involved closely in designing the programme with Lorimer Moseley, Tasha Stanton, David Butler, Mick Thacker, Ian Taverner, Abby Taylor, Luke Postlethwaite. Have I got them all? Did I get them all? Is there anybody else?
Yeah. Did you say Ann Moulders?
And Moulders. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful.
So
And
let's have a
what a lineup. Like and I think I'm so excited because to have these particular people in the room,
yeah.
I mean, from a selfish point of view, totally here is that they are some of the greatest minds, I think, in their respective areas.
Yeah.
They're amazing communicators. And what I think is really cool is that not all of it perfectly aligns with everything that maybe we've said at Noigroup before,
Mm,
or that there's some differences between speakers in some of their thoughts and their ideas. And I think that's beautiful, right? Because it adds that nuance, that layer of let's discuss, let's get a little bit deeper into the weeds. And when you've got a lineup of people who are so humble and so open to not having the truth, that
mm,
they're just trying to get closer to the truth and that they're working hard and pushing hard to do better for the people that actually matter.
yeah.
That's exciting. And so that's what I'm really, really excited for. But I think there's also specific sessions that are just going to be amazing. So we talked about predictive processing just before, and that that it is really, really complex and stuff. And we've got Mick Thacker, who is just incredible in this space,
Mm.
talking about that and its clinical relevance. Abby Tabor, who was once a student of Mick's and now is doing this incredible work and also doing work in anthropology as well. Um,
What's Abby's focus? Just because some of these people are a little bit new to me. So what does Abby focus on at
yeah,
EP3?
So worth checking out some of her papers as well. I think we had an Instagram post not too long ago where we linked a bunch of her papers which were in the predictive processing space, and
Okay.
they're really accessible and really nice papers to look at in the context of pain.
Hmm.
And I personally found them really helpful. Um, a while ago, in my research to wrap my head around some of these ideas, and so maybe we could even link some of these
Okay.
afterwards.
I can put them in the in the notes. I can after this, yeah.
Yeah, very, very easily. So that space, but also in the space of humans and how we interact in terms of our societies and so on
Mm.
around pain and so on. So that's going to be really, really interesting. Um, we've got Ian Taverner, who is lived experience person with chronic pain, who has found re-engagement in life and his recovery through cooking. He's done quite a lot of TV and courses
Mm.
for other people and so on. So he's a huge advocate in this space.
Mm.
But I think it brings in this really nice idea of engaging in an activity that we normally might not consider a part of rehab, but thinking about
Mm.
how something like cooking or something like gardening or
Mm.
something like any other hobby there engages us in a way that is not looking at trying to fix something. It's a process. It's about quite often connection, connecting with other people, connecting with food, or connecting with the environment or whatever it might be, seeing something grow, having a level of uncertainty, leaning
Mm.
into that. There's like all of this beauty that comes from that. So I'm really excited to hear Ian talk about that. David's going to be
Mm.
talking about gardening like he has for
Yeah.
a while, but I've met with him a few times lately, and he's taking it in all kinds of different directions. So I'm really
Yeah.
excited to see where that's going to be landing. Luke Postlethwaite, who's been doing research in the AI space and looking at
Okay.
connectedness,
Okay.
as well as loneliness and how this kind of fits into this modern world that we're leaning into, where there's these agents and people able to talk to these what we used to call. Do you remember that time? It was, not that long ago where something wouldn't work on your computer and you go, damn computer, and curse the thing. But now when you get frustrated with ChatGPT or Claude, you're going, no, what's wrong with you? And you're kind of talking to it like it's an actual being.
Yeah.
It's completely shifted the way that we're engaging with technology. So Luke will be exploring some of that and what the research is showing in
Oh
that
my
space and
gosh.
what that means for clinical practice.
That is going to be
So
awesome. That
yeah,
is so exciting because just on a personal note, aren't we, don't we all need some understanding about AI and, like what the boundaries are around it? And should we be using it
Mm.
for this? And should we be using it in the clinic? Should we be using it with our patients? And that's going to be amazing. Oh my goodness. I wasn't fully aware of what Luke was doing. So I am super excited for that session. Can't wait.
Yeah, so that's unreal. And then we've got some of our other Noigroup faculty joining us for a couple of
Yeah.
other sessions to explore their clinical practice, their history, their sense making, what's changed for them over their careers, and what that might mean for us. So honestly, there is this huge
Mm.
wealth of experience and backgrounds and variability that I think is so exciting and so much
Yeah.
uncertainty as well for someone trying to be involved and trying to make sure everything runs smoothly to some extent like you are, Joe. That level of uncertainty, it really talks to that. Let's lean into this. Let's be excited by this, and let's see
Yeah.
what happens.
Yeah, it's going to the. I've been involved in these sorts of events before, and you look at it on paper, and it's like, oh my goodness, this is going to be fantastic. And then as soon as the thing starts, there's just this energy between the people who are
Mm.
presenting. They are one consummate professionals, um, but also when they get together, something really magical happens because they're all firing off each other, bringing in their different sort of facets, their different approaches, and it is greater than the sum of the parts. And we have had people doing events. Well, we've had people, participants, Lorimer's events before, in tears at the end because it was over. and they didn't want to go home because there's just such a vibrancy about these sort of events and bring these people together. And maybe you could talk a little bit more about. I've not been to an EP3, so this is my first one. So maybe you could just give me an idea of what I should expect beyond the actual lectures themselves.
Yeah, look, it's more than just lectures to begin with. There is discussion, there is exploration, there's activities, there's quirkiness. There's it's just it's different. It's different to anything else that I'd been a part of
Good.
before, and that's exciting. But I think beyond the speakers that we've just kind of been talking about as well, it's the community. And that
Yeah.
is probably one of the big take homes is that we have these communities created, little sub communities within it, more community around Noi,
Mm,
but people develop these relationships with people that they otherwise wouldn't meet and have these support networks that help explore and move forward in this. Because
mm,
the reality of it is that quite often we're going back to workplaces where we might be the only ones thinking about some
yeah.
of these ideas, that we might feel that we don't have that support. And so those networks and communities are so valuable, but it's
Mm.
also just good people.
Yeah.
Like, as Dave Butler quite often says, there's not many dickheads that come to these things. So,
None. They're not
so
allowed in.
they're not allowed in.
On the door, are you a dickhead? No. Okay, you come. No, so that sums it up for me is that these events, the theme of the event is connection, isn't it? And these days that's so important because so many of our audience, so many of our clinicians in this community, this clinical discussion community that we have, are working alone or in environments where their ideas may not be top priority because they've got a massive caseload and they're working in the NHS and it's just bang 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 bang. So this is such an opportunity to get together with like-minded people and really fire yourself up again because everybody in that room will be so excited to be there and sharing their knowledge and have a few drinks. We're going to be having a few drinks together, aren't we, on the Friday
Yeah.
night, I hope?
Yeah. Hopefully not too many, but we'll see. So
No.
yeah, there'll be social bits and there's, yeah, a whole lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
connection.
I've already had people emailing me saying, I want to chat to you about this idea. And, so it's just such a great opportunity, isn't it, for people to bring their ideas forward, talk about things that they're passionate about with other people, and also get to meet some of these people, Lorimer, Tasha, Mick, these people that are often so far away and working in universities and in labs, and you don't get access to them face to
Mm,
face. It's a rare opportunity. And I'm particularly thinking Mick Thacker. He is not an easy man to get hold of. And he's going to be
correct.
in the room. I can't wait to
Yeah.
see him. That's fantastic. So thank you, Brendan. Thank you to everybody who's joined live. I've really enjoyed chatting to Brendan this morning, and I hope that some of you are going to be, we're going to be seeing some of you at EP3. Once again, thank you for your time and your attention. There are several other sessions in the clinical discussion group that have been done by speakers at EP3 where they're going into a deep dive on some of the concepts that they'll be talking about. So I would urge you to check those out. Dave Butler did a brilliant one a couple of weeks ago on gardening. So do go and check those out. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Brendan, for talking me through surprise in the clinic and the impact that it can have, and also through getting me really excited for EP3, which is coming up. It's the 5th to the 7th of June. That's right, Manchester. So
That's
the link is
right.
in the chat. Go and check it out on the Noigroup website if you want more information. And we shall sign off here and say enjoy the rest of your day, evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Brendan. I'll see you in a
Thanks,
couple
Joe.
of weeks.
See you soon.
Take care.